Hey everyone, welcome to our live stream. We had some technical difficulties. Sorry for the late start. We have everyone here. We have Lealin Queen, Rachel Bhatia, Riki Weeks, and myself, Theodore Eftimiades. Today we are discussing how we can support and orient our children towards success in online schooling. Um, I operate a tutoring organization, and obviously this COVID-19 outbreak has changed everything. And I've been talking with a lot of parents and seeing firsthand how this has really disrupted not just their education, but also their home life. And the two are kind of one and the same now, being that a lot of our kids are in home. So parents who want the world for their children shoulder additional responsibility right now in that they're providing child care and schooling on top of carrying on their normal jobs. Um, Parents are trying their best for their children, but right now it's a whole new world. And so we're here to kind of talk about the resources, approaches, and things that we are seeing. So we have Rachel Bhatia. Rachel Bhatia has been a teacher in a variety of classrooms. Rachel, I believe 4th through 7th grade at this point has kind of been your in-class lead of classroom teaching experience. Lealin Queen has a degree, master's degree in online learning systems, which is, I mean, that's pretty much where very suddenly everyone's finding that's kind of the future immediately now. And Riki Weeks he was all of our teachers at one point, and he's gone on into his own career in education. And I believe now, Riki, you are the department chair for the entire math or middle school and high school math department at Flint Hill Prep. Flint Hill School. Okay, very good. All right. So we're just going to jump in with a first question here. E-learning in America seems to have grown up overnight. For folks who may not be familiar with the field, what advances have recently come out and are currently taking place in digital media that are making online education so successful?
It's not sticking as well as it would in a classroom setting, but they are learning and they are producing and they are becoming more independent. So we're on week 3 right now. It's still a work in progress, but I have almost 100% attendance every single day. I'm only missing one kid pretty consistently, and that's still what we're working on. But I think the current challenges right now, the first set of challenges we faced was who has what. So who has internet to begin with, which we had to buy a lot of hotspots and get our kids hotspots. Then from there is who has devices and what devices are they? Are they compatible with what platforms we're trying to use? And we found out that wasn't the case for many kids. So once we got them devices, and I know people from our school who were still in the city, like I ended up having to leave, but when it's still in the city, delivered those devices to them at home in their apartments. So once that got set up, there was a bit of a learning curve on just how to use Hangouts, how to use Google Meets, how to use Zoom. But the kids were pretty resilient and just kind of messed around with them and pretty lenient about attendance and tech issues. And Wi-Fi is still continuing to be an issue, especially in their apartment settings. So that's the main piece, just kind of like the setup process was a big challenge. And then our newer challenge is actually just getting kids to show up, stay online, and get their work done. I mean, requires an immense sense of like self-discipline to monitor yourself as a teenager and be fully accountable for that at home. So right now it's more of a behavioral change that we're trying to work on with the kids. It's like they have a technological foundation to access that playing field has been leveled. It's more about like, do they have the will and the drive and the motivation and the independence to wake up, log on, and then stay online and get that work done. So that's our newest challenge.
Yeah, Riki, before I hand this over to you to answer that question, and I'd love to hear your response from kind of, a step up from teaching. You're responsible for a bunch of teachers. But first, Rachel, I wanted to ask you, so you're relying on kids to, wake up, show up, and attend your class. I guess... How essential is it that you knew these kids first face to face?
That is huge, and I think the only reason that I am able to teach and continue with these things and get any type of work from any student, even my most independent, highest level learner, is because of what happened in the classroom from September till now. Yeah. I think that unless you are raised in a technology-based learning style, which is so rare for so many kids in our country specifically, you'll see that more, around the world, but we're a face-to-face education system and primarily depend on that. And I think that when it comes to crisis where we need to not be in that situation, we're not ready for the public education system. I think that there's just so much room for growth, and I think that this is showing that without the relationships already built and kind of a routine built in the classroom, this transition would have been impossible. I imagine that this transition, if this had happened in September, I have no idea what online learning would look like for my population specifically. I don't know how that would have worked and how successful that would have been, and if learning could have been business as usual. I think it would have been, we're still focusing on building just basic classroom routines, but from a different perspective. So the way that I would have set up my online classroom would have had a totally different emphasis if this was, the second week of September, and I just met these kids. So relationships play a huge role in my ability to continue teaching and even just get a quality of work, because I actually make my lessons, the routine of my lesson online is the same routine as in my classroom. I try to align it pretty much spot on to make that transition even easier for them. So they start class and they end class the same way, and the order of learning and the type of learning, the type of questioning kind of remains. It's just how they respond has changed.
Okay. And Rachel, just something that I kind of missed in the beginning, because so many school systems are so different, public to private, from state to state, from city to city, everyone's different. What school are you working for? Is it public or private? And just what grade are you working with?
Public, independent charter.
Okay.
In New York City. Yeah.
In New York City, got it. And you're 7th grade, yeah?
7th grade. So we are a 4-school network, really 2. It's an elementary school and a middle, but we're in separate locations. Mm-hmm. And the same for the other school. It's an elementary and a middle, and they're in separate locations. Very good.
Okay. Yeah. In the interest of time, I would like to now let's move on to Riki's. Riki, same question from the administrative end. What are your students facing?
I think we have to consider a bunch of different aspects of this, because this isn't just a normal break. The nature of this break is one that is emotionally charged for many families and many students, and that has an impact as well, and I don't think we can downplay that. So I think what Rachel mentioned about relationships is key. Part of our goal is really to maintain those relationships and make sure that students know that they have somebody kind of in their corner, not just as a teacher, but just as another person to be able to reach out to and kind of help process some of this stuff. Even the switch over, I think sometimes we can confuse being digital natives with being very easily to pick up how to do certain things in technology, and that's just not the case. It's almost the opposite, because technology has always been present in these kids' lives. They don't necessarily know how to use it in certain ways. A lot of times it's social media, things like that, and unfortunately the school system hasn't really caught up with using things like social media to be able to engage students. So this long distance learning piece for us has been an adaptation for sure. Like Rachel said, we're a face-to-face community and we pride ourselves on relationships, so trying to maintain some of that is important. The other piece for us that's difficult are a lot of unanswered questions. I teach at a private independent school. I do teach AP calculus, and right now, we're waiting on word from the College Board and what the end of that course looks like. And I think, for some kids, are we going to have final exams, for example, in our normal classes or our honors classes? Those things are still unanswered in some ways because we're just not sure how much we can actually accomplish. The training piece can't be taken too lightly either. I think our kids are used to using it, but being trained on how to use it as a learning tool, or even have the experience to just shift into that gear, it's substantial. So it's a bit of a leap. I was talking with some colleagues today, and the concern came up that what happens if some of our best students aren't our best students anymore because of this shift, and vice versa. Some of our weakest or lowest performing students could end up being really powerful in this online piece. So it's just interesting to kind of think about how this will turn everything on its head. I also think we can't understate just the basic needs that have to be met for students to be in a space to learn. So thinking about safety and making them feel competent and a sense of autonomy, all those things are things that we need to keep in mind as we're planning lessons online and things like that, so that students are still getting the things they need to even be in a learning position.
Okay. Riki, I have another question here for you. Actually, hold on, let me see if I want to switch to go to part 2, or let's bring another question to Lealin here. And I don't see any questions in the chat right now, so yeah, Riki, so what risks are we facing with such, I don't know, your kids, it seems like your AP class is still on schedule. Are all of your classes still on schedule? And what risks are we facing basically heading into not just summer break of, 3 to 4 months, but at this point possibly 5, 6 months, but hoping, optimistic that we can return to a normal school year come September, come August. What are we losing in an additional 2 to 3 months of no schooling?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that, routine is a powerful part of learning. And any break in that routine, it's going to take a while to kind of get back into gear and make sure that, you're performing at your highest level. So this kind of stop and start that occurred. I know at our school, the closures came while we were on spring break. So even getting kids to switch back into the school mindset was a challenge that we had to consider when we were thinking about what we were going to do. In terms of the bigger picture risks, there's a lot of inflexibility at the lowest and highest levels of education. So those schools that have not a lot of money, where students don't have access to technology or things like that, they're going to really struggle with a transition like this. And those students, of course, would be at a disadvantage for a longer break. But then you also have the highest levels. I have a senior in high school right now, and we're wondering what college is going to look like in the fall. And I'm sure folks who are getting ready to really consider their applications for next year, for the junior class, for example, how does this either be a detriment to their application process or possibly a challenge in using some of the things that students have come used to use in their application process? It's really interesting to think about all of the domino effects that a break like this can have, not just on individuals, but on systems. So really considering the systematic approach to education in the United States, and now we're going to have this kind of interesting blip on the radar, and how that works itself out, I think only time will tell.
Yeah. I would love to kind of end this discussion talking about how we grow from this. It's so far ahead to think of. I know that we don't really know, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring that question to Lealin, because Lealin is the one. Online learning has exploded overnight, and as you said, we're trying to get social media in there, and there's a lot of things going on. But let's end the conversation with that. At this point, I want to take a question from the audience, and this is one that I was kind of wondering. Rachel, I've seen you post stuff just on social media about your students and how they've reacted to online instruction. And I remember seeing one of your students said something like, "Online instruction, it hits different," or something like that, ... And it was a funny little quip. But then Riki talks about our strongest students and how that changes with, what happens when our strongest students aren't our strongest students anymore, and students who previously couldn't really engage with the content feel empowered in this situation. Or I don't know if it's empowered or the format is different for them and it helps them. But the question is, what benefits do you see, and let's say benefits immediately and then moving forward, what benefits do you see as a result of the online teaching? And the question asker says, found that some of the distractions from the classroom are reduced. Has anyone else noticed that?
So I think immediate benefits of this is I have seen, benefits and drawbacks. Some of my highest learners are performing much lower in the past 3 weeks, strictly because of access and the flexibility they have in their home. And I actually had a couple conversations with students yesterday about this who were very, very upset. It was a very emotionally driven conversation because they feel not themselves, and we talked about kind of academic, and they're so concerned, and that's an emotional struggle. The benefits, alternatively, I have students who were having a hard time in the classroom because of the pressure I think that they felt and the embarrassment maybe they felt when things weren't going their way academically. They don't have that problem as much anymore. Like, this is so independent. Discussions are so collaborative and kids are still talking, but they're in small groups all day long, and so kids whose voices are maybe kind of muffled just from their own self-confidence issues, that's not an issue. So I'm seeing some of my lower learners just kind of flourish, and they want to type more, they want to talk to me more, and I talk to them multiple times a day, and they want to talk about what they're learning and what they're doing and what's happening at home, and they just feel different. So, and that's not across the board, and that's, outliers low and outliers high, and I would count that though as a huge benefit, just like the opportunity for voice to develop in a different way, because middle school is humbling, socially and academically. It's kind of when you figure out like things that you're more passionate about or things that maybe you used to feel more confident in but maybe aren't anymore. And so this is allowing students to develop a confidence in a different way and use that technology and use these different ways to express themselves. Like, kids can do videos and kids can write and kids can listen and respond in a multiple different formats and modalities. And I think that those options and choices are less limited because we didn't have this technology in the classroom on a daily basis. Like, I had 5 laptops to use every day. So the type of communication and production that comes with learning is now across the board for everybody. And kids are having new ways to express themselves. So I think that's a huge benefit. What's the second part to your question? Sorry.
The second part to my question. Sorry, I'm looking forward too.
I know.
So the question was, what benefits do you see? And basically, have you noticed that some of the distractions of the classroom are reduced?
Oh, yes. Okay, so yes, absolutely. Work takes less time, and the kids notice it too. They're like, this takes us so much less time now. But yes, because you're not worried about the random social conversations that happen in a middle school classroom. But at the same time, now they have their phones by their side, so there's a new kind of distraction that I'm competing with. And that has been a challenge for me to try to figure out like how to get them to put the phone down and not do a million other things, or the TV on in the background. So social distractions have completely ended, and like kids respond and think more rapidly. But home distractions are ever present, and that is my next thing I'm trying to figure out how to get them sorted. So.
Okay. Riki, I would like to bring that question to you. Do you have any other insights, kind of other areas that maybe, or things Rachel said that you want to add to?
Sure. I think one of the benefits, clearly Rachel already kind of touched on it, but is the individualization that can occur as part of this process. So students can actually work in their areas of strength. So thinking about the student who really enjoys making movies or presentations or animations, students can do that now, and we're actually moving further away from kind of the pen and paper tedious tasks and thinking more about, what is a good demonstration of learning, what's a proof of learning, and students being able to operate in those areas of strength is definitely a benefit. I think the double-edged sword part of that is if students are only working in their strength, what do we do about their weaknesses? But I think there's a confidence that occurs when you're working in an area of strength that allows you to look at weaknesses in a different way. So that's clearly a benefit. In terms of the distractions, I think it's hard to be an online learner and not multitask. And I think multitasking at times can really take away from the level of concentration. You're changing windows, you're replying to a chat and also looking at the video feed and all those things. So I think there's, the jury's out on whether or not that's going to have an impact. But I know that the home distractions, of course, and I really don't think we can understate the pressure that's being put on family at home to help facilitate this type of work. I have 3 kids at home, and I'm trying to run my own classes while maintaining their learning and those types of things as well. And and I'm probably in a pretty privileged position, and lucky to say that, where other families may not be that privileged to be able to actually, limit those distractions or support students so they're getting the most out of what they're doing online.
Yeah, we have a parent here who's asking really kind of the same sort of things you're talking about here. And it's a hard question, I think I'm about to ask. But what they say is they found that their kids need more help with staying on track and staying concentrated. As a parent working from home, I can't afford to be constantly watching over them. So, it's a blessing that this is only a temporary thing and this isn't the future forever. But what are teachers? How about this? What are teachers trying? What can teachers do, and what are teachers trying to do to help parents in these situations? Riki, you are one, so let me bring that question to you first.
So, a lot of it is being very particular about space. Really thinking about crafting a space because, a lot of times, even when we're at school, students know when they step through a classroom door that learning is about to happen, and it's a code switch in their brain that gets them in that moment. A lot like suiting up for a basketball game or anything like that. So, really thinking about devoting a specific space, devoid of as many distractions as possible, and as comfortable for the student as possible so that they can really get into that mode. And also thinking about, what they have access to and what can really work with efficiency so that, the distractions are limited, because most of us get distracted when there's a moment where we're frustrated or where there's a down moment or a variety of reasons. But the more we can do to limit that start and stop nature of this work, the more they can kind of get in that zone of proximal development and really kind of think about the learning that's happening and not just looking at these assignments and the lessons we're doing as just check boxes.
Yeah.
So that, it's tough, but I think that's probably the single greatest impact is to create a space that is devoted to learning.
Yeah. Okay, in the interest of time, I'd like to bring a question to Lealin, but then we're going to loop back to Rachel and Riki, and then we'll kind of finish the conversation with the final question. So, Lealin, when I asked you sort of where you thought this industry was taking you before COVID, the outbreak occurred, you used the word military, which is so far from what it's being used for now, and I'm sure people are working like crazy to adapt these tools over to education. So my question for you is how is this an instance of creative destruction or that's not the right word, but basically how is all this creativity that is flooding into education now going to change the products that are offered 6 months, 2 years, 5 years is far. But yeah, how does it change everything?
Wow, big question. So far, the biggest change I've seen is in the nature of what we think of as how time goes into these things. So, for example, a lot of students and a lot of professors so I work at the University of Maryland right now, and I teach mostly multimedia production as well as assisting professors, faculty, as well as students get used to the online transition. And the biggest change in kind of the future I'm seeing is people are using the time they have specifically to do that. So what I'll say in terms of why I brought up the military before, there are times when if somebody says, all right, I have a paper to write or I have X assignment to do and I only have a 2-hour window to do it in that 2-hour window, they focus and engage.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily happen at a set time. So if somebody's a working professional or, again, somebody's on duty and they only can do something in a small window, they have to adapt the rest of their learning to that time that they're able to use. So moving forward, I think it's going to come down to a lot more asynchronous learning, meaning having a lot of the content pre-recorded and allowing learners to watch all of that content beforehand and then adapting to when they have the individual discussion time and really using that time effectively. Just saying, look, everybody, we have this 45-minute time at 5 o'clock to do these things and have people engage that way. And the other thing that I've seen is a rise in, and not to harp on it too much, but the rise in gamification, the rise in
Let's talk about that.
Oh, sure. So allowing for fun in the classroom in terms of discovery. So, for example, I changed one of my media production workshops into a fully gamified presence where they had to essentially unlock different levels by discovering, oh, if I click here, this information pops up that answers this question for this level. So creating it in a way where it's almost sending them down a rabbit hole and forcing that discovery of I can't progress until I'm able to figure this out. So gamifying it seems to give a lot of, at least the college students that I work with, much more of a drive for that limited window they have. And switching it back onto the faculty that I've been working with, allowing them to work with asynchronous and pre-record lectures and finding the elements that they say, you know, I can allow students to review this once or twice just in case, and then really develop my relationships, as you all were talking about, in that one-on-one time or in a Hangouts call or in an email or one of those chat windows.
I have Habitica here on my phone. I do a little class with like kind of digital study skills with kids, and I discovered Habitica, and they they loved it. It was a lot of fun, and I'm a level 8 warrior now, and I totally intend on bringing that to basically. I work with my students for like a week, 2 weeks on intensive stuff, and I'm totally bringing Habitica to them because it's a fun game to pop in and then leave out of. You take the lessons with you. You're not a level 8 warrior anymore, but you walk away with the lessons, and that's really cool.
That is one additional thing, and I do want to respect time also, but using tabletop rules and stuff like Dungeons and Dragons or Dungeon World, and having that type of narrative in there, I've seen a really interesting rise in. So I was talking with HR about HR courses that I've helped teach, and we created a tabletop version where it's all about conflict resolution, and it's about, look, this person is frustrated, you're frustrated, how are you going to be mindful? And actually turning that into a game mechanic. Helvetica is a great, I use it too. I'm a level 41 healer.
Wow, hey man, give me the party.
But so we have these different task lists and different things of saying, all right, what is your daily habit that you want to get into? What is the thing that you need to do once in a while? What is a habit that you want to get out of, and how do you break that? So gamifying it just adds those mechanics and makes it a lot more, makes it engaging on a different level. And if I can add one more thing, I got very lucky. So I was actually the type of learner that started excelling when I started doing online classes. So the best I've ever done in school was actually my master's degree, where we had a lot of hybrid classes, and I was able to, you know, sometimes I would get distracted in the classroom in my undergraduate, and especially remember high school, when if I got distracted and then suddenly I was just lost throughout the rest of the class. When I was doing my master's degree, I was able to say, I completely missed this train of thought. Let me rewind and continue going forward. And I mean, I excelled a lot more because I was able to work with it in a way that recognizing, oh, I need a break real quick, stopping the lecture, walking away, coming back, and returning with the fresh eyes. So, I mean, I got very lucky in terms of the series of events, but that's on one side of this issue.
Well, you know, I think that what you just said, and this kind of goes into our next question here, what you just said is a very relatable experience for a lot of younger folks. Engaging with the coursework in a different way kind of unlocks your performance. I found that when I got to college and I got more creativity in how I approached some assignments where I could make a movie instead of writing an essay, those were things it just lit up my mind, and I poured myself into them. And that's the kind of thing that I think by shaking everything up, kind of new, you know, cracks in the earth open and things come up that we didn't see coming. So let me take this question now to Rachel and Riki, and I'll ask Riki first. My question is for you: How is this experience going online and so many things being figured out on the fly? What lessons are we learning that are definitely going to be in our classroom come September, the next September? What are we learning now that is, transforming education going forward?
Well, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that what drives innovation is necessity, and we're getting
Yeah.
emails all the time from even Google, a huge corporation like Google, who's taking the time to add things to their Meet platform and Zoom as well, and like adding things daily that they know teachers need to make this work more seamlessly or with more functionality so we can do more things. So, that necessity, I think, is going to push innovation, not just in the classroom, but also in the supports and resources we use. I think this is going to lead to a fundamental shift in education. I was actually talking to my AP Calc students the day we left for spring break about, if schools closed and we go to an online version, I firmly believe it's going to fundamentally shift school and probably have some negative impacts as well. I mean,
Sure.
Smaller schools will suffer. Independent and private schools, are going to suffer as well, because if there's the same platform being used across schools, then what is going to differentiate one school from another? The school experience is kind of lost there. Homeschooling, as Lealin mentioned, is going to probably see a rise as well, just out of safety concerns, but also because now we have platforms that can deliver it in a way that, as you all have mentioned, is engaging. And I hope that classroom teachers can kind of learn from that. Not to mention the evolution of LMS systems and these learning management systems that do allow us to make learning more than just a checkbox, and really offer students the ability to create in ways that we weren't able to before. I think technology and this moment are fundamentally going to decentralize learning in a way that's going to challenge educational norms. What are grades? Not letter grades, but like 9th and 10th and 11th. What do those grades mean anymore?
Yeah.
When students can kind of level up on their own, as was mentioned, or if they can kind of follow their own path, and then what does a grade in school actually mean anymore? And then fundamentally, the grades we give as well. Like, what are we grading? Are we grading the products that they're creating? Are we grading the proof of learning that those creations show? I mean, there's just a variety of ways that this is really going to force us to rethink pretty much every level of education.
Riki, we got a question in the chat specifically about the notion of pass-fail classes going forward. Would you mind talking about that specifically?
Sure. So this is an interesting thing that we're wrestling with as well. We're in a county, Fairfax County, Virginia, and one of the things that they decided on was they were going to go to mastery grading, which means that students can't really get lower than what they currently had, at least for the third quarter that they were still finishing up. And I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with fourth quarter. For us, fundamentally, it's been really thinking about what would a pass mean. Is that a 68 or a 96? And how does giving each person just a passing grade distinguish between those? And again, I think that's partly archaic, and that we're still trying to map on what should be a new system to this really old way of thought about percentages and all those things, which we know don't necessarily work that well for really demonstrating what a student knows. But so really thinking about the pass-fail is nice in that it does give us some data around how students are doing, but it doesn't allow us to differentiate who's passing barely and who's excelling. And then I think particularly as a math teacher, the question becomes, how does this factor into placement? And how do we know students are ready for the next level or an honors level or any of those things? Do honors levels even matter anymore? I think a lot of those questions will be answered now that we have this kind of opportunity knocking at our door.
Sure. Okay. Lealin, quick question for you. And then I want to get to Rachel. Same question here. But Lealin, I noticed that you sent me another one of your videos. I can't recall the title. What was the title of the video, Lealin?
Oh, the last webinar that I did?
Yes, on Monday. Last Monday.
Oh, that was, 1 second.
Mastering.
It was getting started with online learning with a Fearless Teaching workshop.
Yes, Fearless Teaching, that was it. Okay, so I noticed that your approach was basically built on this is what we do in the classroom. How do we directly port this into online education? Tell me, is that something we're doing out of desperation, necessity, or is that like the ideal way of building online education?
Honestly, I have to give a cop-out answer where it's both. As Riki said, it's kind of out of necessity because we have to recognize time is limited for our professors. We have to tell them they have the lesson plans already created, and to ask them start from zero and reinvent the wheel, that's just not feasible for them to get it back to the students. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're mapping and helping that paradigm shift. But the other thing is a lot of the resources online and a lot of the ways that we've shown education can move forward don't necessarily have to be that different from really innovative teaching. So part of that is resetting that mindset and in some ways allowing, the reason it's mentioned as fearless, we recognize that a lot of this will be seeing what sticks. A lot of this is we have to experiment. We have to make sure that everybody's on the same page with not everything is going to work at that point in time, and we have to find ways that do work and then say, all right, we found this element, let's move forward. So again, it's a little bit of both, helping teachers in terms of this is how you're used to teaching. In the workshop that you're referring to, we have a slide that's all about what do you need to feel as a teacher like you are succeeding, as like what type of assessments are you doing, and then even breaking that down a little bit more and saying, all right, does assessment just mean quiz? How are you checking for understanding? Do you use eye contact, or do you look for a student whose eyes are glazed over and focus on them? What can you do what tool can you find and evaluate in terms of, oh, this is fulfilling that same need. I feel more comfortable moving forward in this lesson.
Very good. Rachel, I'd like to take that the question that we had originally over to you. I know that I can imagine that you run so when I heard, I recently found out that you had been nominated for Teacher of the Year by Washington Post, and I was not surprised. I know that you work really hard, and I can imagine you, yes, indeed. Let me switch over to Rachel. So I wasn't surprised because I could see you running a classroom where kids feel inspired to perform beyond what they thought themselves capable of. And that's the sort of thing that garners that sort of recognition. And so it was well-deserved. So congratulations, number one. And my question for you is, now that, this online shift is bringing out new kinds of, kids are succeeding in ways that they never succeeded before, struggling in ways that they never succeeded before. I keep thinking back to Riki saying, what happens when our best students are no longer our best students? And a lot of different personalities are interacting with this differently. So based on what we've seen and what we will continue to see as long as the school year goes, how do you see your classroom, not with the same kids, but with the next kids, how is it going to be transformed on a very, you working with one student level, come next year?
So I think that my class, so let me just take it a second back, is we didn't actually have technology access for every child. And I think that is something that I would love to see a switch, but that's not in my control.
Right.
But what I think in a classroom setting is come September, is just figure out who has what and how are we using those materials. Because right now the main challenge that we had was the frustration, the behaviors that come out of this is the frustrations that they're feeling, the loneliness that they're feeling, the emotional challenges of being super independent versus with this group of people that maybe have known their entire academic career. So I just think in the fall, when we move forward and provided that technology access increases for everybody, that's more of an equitable playing field, is just giving the time, right? Is how are we accessing information? Am I the only person delivering it? Where else are they getting information from? How are we using that information? New perspectives, because it's clearly I'm not the only person getting content anymore. Like, I am delivering live lessons, but I'm also pulling from a wealth of different resources to deliver information to students and have them access learning. It's not my voice. So with that is, how are they learning? Not learning. Are just going to be just individual production? Are they creating? Are they synthesizing? Are they using different collaborative methods to work with other people to innovate? It's no longer just about the individual student, and I think that this is a prime example of how we've gone from a classroom setting, right, to the individual at home trying to hold themselves accountable for their own learning, back to an environment in September where they've had these two experiences side by side in one school year, and it's changed them as learners, and as teachers we need to adapt to that change. We have a generation and cohorts of kids who have seen two completely different types of education.
Yeah.
Isolation, and then there's going to be an after. And I think that to neglect and not use this period as a time to kind of update how we deliver information and then update our expectations for students, especially in the public education system as a whole, would be an example of like neglect in our pedagogy. I think that it's an extremely important thing for us as teachers, and we need the support of leadership and systems to align all the way up. But I mean, teachers are motivated. We're showing up for our kids, and we haven't stopped, right? And we're gonna keep on going, keep pushing. But we need everything above us vertically to align in order for that to happen. Like, I would love to continue to work in an environment. I came from an environment where I had more technology access, and I had one-to-one. And in this environment, I don't, and that's just kind of the fact of the matter. And it's no one's. I mean, that goes above our classroom setting and above our school setting. And I think that if we can pull resources to get technology to kids, everybody in this country, get them access, they can have online learning, that should be the norm, right? Like, if we can do this in a time of crisis now we're providing kids with laptops and Wi-Fi and all these things that we've neglected for them, no matter how old or how young they are, how are we going to transfer that into the classroom? And that doesn't come from the classroom teacher, that doesn't even come from the school leader necessarily, that comes from people and larger systems and larger districts and policies that we implement. So I think a vertical alignment has to occur, and if teachers are given, me personally, if we're given the tools necessary to keep this kind of evolution of the digital classroom, but in a regular face-to-face setting, we're going to see a unique children's minds come after this. I think if we continue this path and we say, and acknowledge this change and acknowledge this opportunity that we have, and make resources, both human and fiscal, align, we're going to see some unique innovation come out of this generation specifically, because they've had this kind of stop and start, right? And if we just pretend like this didn't happen, we go back into September, and I go back to an environment where I have 5 computers in my room, and then I pretend like that I don't use any of the things that they've learned. This spring, going into summer, it's going to be a waste. So I would ideally, with the resources, continue to evolve this and hopefully, and like Lealin was saying, things are more accessible, and Google is reaching out, Zoom's reaching out. All these things are evolving for the classroom teacher. So like, we need to be able to use these things and have the training and support and opportunity to continue.
Okay, let's take this conversation into the home stretch. My question is now going to get a lot more practical to basically what's going on right now. I perceive an issue as the purveyor of a tutoring organization with a bunch of relationships that I'm watching over, and it is in quality control. Typically, the internet and the proclivity to take everything to top 10, top 5 lists, usually the internet sorts quality pretty well, but right now there is just a deluge of resources out there. I mean, there was a Google Doc floating around that had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of free resources, and I was like, I operate a company, it is in my interest to know every one of these, and there is no way that I can go through all of these. It's way too much. There's too much information. So I want to take this question to Lealin first, and then I want to take it to our teachers. And Lealin, my question is, let me find the question mark in here. So the desperation, everyone's desperation right now to get things working now is not helping. How can desperate parents engage with these resources, the gamut that's available? How can they engage with these resources meaningfully in a way that recognizes, as we're talking about a lot, their limited time?
Sure. So I guess The first thing I would say is with this desperation, we have to all take a breath and then move forward, because we have to recognize this is new. Even for, again, I have a degree in learning design and technology. This is part of my wheelhouse, and this is unprecedented. So recognizing that we need to take a second and be kind to ourselves in terms of we have to understand this is stressful for everybody. It's stressful for the parents, the professor, the teachers, and the students as well. Riki, as you were talking about how this is new for the students, and performance is a challenge. Rachel, the same thing that you were talking about. It's a big amount of stress for everybody. So that would be the first thing. The next one would be the way to recognize what is the most important is to look at your values and use that as your rubric. And I really do mean sit down, and it'll save more time going forward, because this is a marathon at this point. We're looking at not just a few weeks, we're looking at months for isolation, for how all of this is going to be moving forward. So we need to take as much time as we can to say, what are my values and what are important? And practically that means if you're looking at a whole bunch of free resources, you need to have a certain amount of things that you say, these are the elements that I need to see in order for me to say yes to this resource. Does it have a way for me to review this work? Does it have, we're partially talking about inequitable access to technology.
Yeah.
Is it within the bounds of my technology to be able to do this? Do I have to rely on having an active internet connection, or can I use a printout from home? How much ink am I going to be able to buy? These type of things, while it sounds like it'll take more time, it's one of those moments where if you reflect on what's important to you, you'll be able to save that time for this incredible amount of information. And some of it is not legit. And we have to recognize that with our value system, all right, if this is what we're looking for, this is what I'm willing to concede with if, let's say, a website shuts down, or let's say your favorite creator on YouTube has a copyright strike and they have to take down a bunch of their educational videos. I learned a lot of Python coding through a certain series where they got shut down because they were using copyrighted music, and those videos haven't come back up, and I didn't save them. So how do we find things that work for us and keep them in a way that is going to fit within our schedule? So again, first step, take a breath. This is due to everybody, and there's hope at the end of the tunnel. We know that we're resilient. We know that we have teachers like Rachel and Riki out there really dedicated to making sure our learners and our students succeed. So we can at least trust that there are people out there, and we'll be able to find those educators that align with our values.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Lealin. I'd like to bring the same question to Rachel and Riki. I guess let's go with Rachel first, and then Riki, you can kind of, we'll close the conversation at that point. Rachel, I want to ask you the same question, which is, how do you approach this deluge of resources available? But I also want to kind of add, as an educator yourself who's had to engage with some of these resources, what resources are you recommending?
So first part, there's so much going on right now, and there's so many resources, and I found the best way for myself to narrow things down and like what my students have been used to without changing everything overnight for them. Everything I've been doing is gradual. So both for my kids it's been gradual, and for me it's been gradual because I already had experience with online or digital resources that I've been trying to incorporate into my instruction for years now.
Yeah.
And so I kind of go down the same rabbit hole of the familiar. So like if I read certain education blogs, or there are certain websites, instructional websites that I frequent, or larger corporate like National Council of Teaching Mathematics. Like there's certain platforms that blog about certain concepts, and then I go through that link. I think the easiest way for me to filter what is best for me and kind of align with what I've been doing just initially is to go with kind of what's familiar to me and maybe a couple of degrees of separation, and then from there I keep going. Because I think, the massive amounts of Google Docs, and there's been an overflow of free resources now, and things that weren't free and now are free. And are those free qualities actually beneficial to my students, and how would I evaluate how beneficial they are if I haven't had a chance to test them out besides in the digital setting or a distant setting for the first time. So this is not necessarily something I want to do for the first time for everything that I'm doing. I try and keep things consistent that they're already familiar with, and then kind of add it week by week. And that's for myself in both learning and then how I want to bring that into my classroom and scaffold it for my students to be able to access it. And then what I've been using in the classroom, again, I've been bringing in things week by week, but I kind of anchor everything in a deck, in like a presentation deck of some sort. And so I've been using Google Slides, and everything's one. And so from their warm-up until their exit, everything is in there. Videos, reads, practice games, everything's embedded in, so they're not trying to find things on their own. Even if I do like a web quest of some sort, it'll come from within the slide, and things are hyperlinked. So it's taking them to places that they need to go. I would love to be able to allow for more innovation and creativity and kind of their own research, but we're not, just because of the inexperience in the classroom up until this point, we're not there yet. Yeah. So things I've been doing, really slides, all the G Suite applications kind of really ground my instruction, because I are most familiar with that, because email accounts and everything is linked, and that's familiar and they understand that. And now I've been trying to incorporate more types of media. So we've been using Flipgrid, which is a personal favorite. It's a very easy way for them to respond. And they get kind of goofy with it, and they like seeing each other's faces. And it's another way to see each other respond in a different type of whatever video creation they want to do. And it's kind of got social media elements that they like. Seesaw is a great resource as well. I'm trying to think of I gotta find it. But Edpuzzle is great. Edpuzzle is a great resource, and they actually are doing free pro accounts for teachers now. And so is Kahoot. Kahoot's doing free pro accounts for teachers, and those are both gaming way that you can create challenges, and kids can do it in a safe, self-paced way to engage with content in a competition. And then on Edpuzzle, you can embed your own videos, Khan Academy videos, YouTube videos, and then you can implement open-ended or multiple choice questions in the video, so it automatically pauses it for them, and they have to answer, and it can link to their Gmail accounts, so it's all kind of under one roof. And then you can also put in kind of like a pause and thing. So those are my go-to resources right now. They're familiar with and have had. It's easy to kind of adjust to.
Yeah. I'm also I'm very careful to root all of my instruction in the same document. I want I don't want to have to jump around and it helps with organization. It helps with them knowing how the class works. And that's so important now in such an unsure time that one thing works. Okay, so Riki, I'd like to bring the same question to you. What resources are you engaging with right now, and what are you recommending?
Yeah, we're an Apple certified school, so we all have Macs, so we're doing a lot of the Apple materials.
Interesting.
But we're also G Suite and using Meet and Google Docs and all those things. Really, Rachel took all of the ones that I would have mentioned: Kahoot, Flipgrid, Edpuzzle. All of those we use as well. I think one of the things we've been looking for recently are more collaborative tools, so ways that students can learn together. And Padlet has been huge for that. We use Padlet quite a bit because we can have a bunch of people in the same place at one time doing different things. Also, less known, but Jamboard, which is part of the G Suite as well, which is actually a collaborative whiteboard app.
Yeah.
Just started using that and really picking that up. Not all of our students have, digital writing utensils, but you can embed photos from phones and other things that really, allow for a more collaborative space and, address at least a little bit of the isolation that Rachel was talking about. The biggest thing, just to go back to the main question around, how are we choosing these things? I think Lealin hit the nail on the head when he said about, stress and really kind of coming to grips with the fact that this is really a stressful time.
Yeah.
So if you're going to adapt something, I would say adapt something that's not going to add to your stress level as much as possible. And similarly, you can't just think about you. You also want to think about your kids, and not, implementing something that's going to add undue stress to them. Again, they're the focus. So really thinking about, what they've been used to, as Rachel mentioned, like really keeping some consistency with tools they already know. And if you are going to do something new, try and layer that in, and really implement it in a meaningful way so that students, aren't stressed and aren't seeing new technologies as a barrier to learning in this way.
Yeah. Riki, so hypothetical, you get a call from one of your students' parents, and they're saying that, like, it's the household is getting so stressful that it's hard to maintain their child's education at this point, and they don't know what to do. I mean, this is something that I don't know if as educators you guys often find yourselves in these shoes. I have before, but nowhere near as frequently as now. So what are you doing to help, that person calls you, what do you do?
So luckily, my school was pretty good about doing parent education pieces. So really thinking about educating the parent body as much as you are the student body, so that they're aware and that they have tools and strategies to be able to work with. My youngest daughter's in first grade at Flint Hill, and I got a huge amount of resources from her teachers to really help us at home, with a large amount of clarity around what this is good for. If this is optional, this is not. Like, I think educators need to be really clear about expectations, and we can't expect the same outcomes that we would have been able to achieve in the classroom. It's just not possible, particularly because many of us were unprepared for this shift, training and just emotionally. So really thinking about giving parents a helpline, for example, and not a true helpline like a phone to call or anything, but a way that they can reach out and let us know that they need support, and ideally what we can do to better support them at home, because we know a lot of this is falling on them, and they deserve as much as the kids to have supports in place that really help them manage this. Not to go too far into where this could end up, but family dynamics are going to change because of this. Mom is teacher or dad is teacher isn't always the easiest thing. I sit in parent conferences every year and hear from parents who say, my kid won't listen to me, but if you tell them exactly what I told them, they listen to you for some reason. And I'm sure we're not past that. So really trying to manage the different hats can be tough because kids are tough, and they see parents pretty one-dimensional. Unfortunately, in many ways, this might actually be an opportunity for them to see them as more of an ally in their learning. I think a lot of students generally turn the parental piece off when they go to school, and for some that's really good, and for others, I think they're losing what could be a really valuable resource for them at home.
Riki, what is your work-life balance like recently?
It's been tough. Today was really our first day of full-blown class. I've had 2 days full of professional development meetings, hour-long meetings, and honestly feeling a little down on myself for not being able to give my kids the attention that they need. So really trying to find a balance. I think it'll take me a week or so to really kind of see where the pieces are, where I can find the time to really make sure that my kids are doing what they need to be doing in terms of their learning, making sure that I can support them with anything they need. But it's really been tough, not to mention the amount of front loading. I was mentioning with Rachel before the call started about, it's like planning for a substitute every day. The amount of planning that is being placed on us as teachers it's pretty significant. So I haven't had a lot of time to interact with my fam over the past couple days because I've just been ingrained in trying to get meet links set up, and this class page and this resource, and working out the kinks, and But it's what we got to do. So
Well, yeah, we're finding ourselves as educators in really unfamiliar terrain right now. And I mean, people have told me that this pressure is bringing out parts of people that don't always come out, that don't, always have the need to come out. We're all under pressure right now. And I thank you for taking the time to speak with us. You didn't have to do this. And I thank you for just pushing so hard for your kids. And yeah. I mean, if you don't get a thank you elsewhere, I hope you do. Here's one.
you guys think we are still my kids. So.
Right. Lealin, so let me ask you, what is work transformed into for you? I mean, I follow you on Facebook, and typically it's a steady feed and by steady, I mean years of a feed of puns. And now I actually reached out to you because you said, I know normally I'm just doing puns, but I'm here to help in case anyone needs it right now. What has your work-life balance been like?
So it shifted a lot. That was both a nice thing for me to put out, and also maybe not the best idea because I've been people have been reaching out a lot. So
It says good things about you, Lealin.
Thank you. But for the most part, I take a lot of calls throughout the day. I basically just opened up my schedule and tell people don't call me after 11 p.m. But aside from that, I've tried to be really flexible. I have cousins and family members who are parents who are just like, please help me. So I'll sit there, and I've helped a couple of my younger cousins through some of their online assignments. And then I have faculty members calling me saying, what do I do with this regard? How do I do video? Most of my specialty has been in video production, so how do I create this video? How do I upload it? How do I encode it? What does my bandwidth limit mean? Why did that just pop up? So that's pretty much my work-life balance. Aside from that, I've been hanging out with the dog that I adopted recently, so that's the the biggest change.
That's good on you. I've actually heard some things just on Twitter about grants available to people who are adopting pets at this time, because I mean, pets, we talk, not that I want to shift into talking about pets for too much, but at-home dynamics are changing and being sealed in. A lot of animals don't live in homes that are great for them. And that's probably really rough. And, we talk about essential personnel. The folks who take care of animals are still working. And they're probably, they're like a silent group that's probably under quite a lot of pressure right now. So it is important to think about those folks and about animals. So thank you for that. That's a real thing.
It's true. But I will say, and while a lot of these orders of not going outside, people have taken them, I think, a little too literally. It is all right to go outside of your front door or open your window and get some fresh air. And that not to be too flippant, but it is really important to once in a while stick your head out of the window and just see the fact that the world still exists out there outside of your apartment.
Yeah. I went to a park for the first time. I've gone out on walks and stuff, but, not really any people around. I went to a main park downtown, and I was kind of like, this is kind of weird. There's a lot of people around. I haven't been outside for a while. So, that is a good thing, and you can be safe. You can still observe safety protocol while being out. And yes, that is important. Rachel, I want to bring that same question to you. I've always known you to be a really hardworking teacher, and I'm sure you're doing whatever it takes right now to be there for your students. What has your work-life balance been like recently?
It's not great. It's mostly work, which is okay. That's what needs to happen right now. And I'm hoping to get to a point where it's not this intense, but it's a scary time. And my kids are in a neighborhood of New York, within Brooklyn specifically, that is a very high rate of positive COVID cases. Yeah. And so they're in the epicenter right now. And I am very fortunate that I was able to leave, but that's not the case for them. And I need to be there for them, and that's something that needs to happen. And I am aware of that role that I'm filling for them. I can hear in the background, I had to mute my other window. I had the Google Hangout thing binging in the background. All my kids saw that I was online for a second and just sent me a million messages. So that's 20 minutes ago. So that's Monday through Friday is like them, and then Saturday and Sunday I told them that they need a break. Like we're trying to get a routine going where movement break right now, so you guys should take a movement break kind of a thing. We're trying to make routines where I get some work-life balance back, but also they're kind of all day long, and I get migraines at the end of the day if I'm on my screen for too long. Like, I can't even imagine this adjustment for them. It's so much. So yes, my work-life balance isn't where it should be, but my kids aren't there at all, and it is getting them to a point where that they're able to manage their day and their screen time and kind of shrink it. Like, I don't want them on a screen for 8 hours, 10 hours. So I think once that settles and once things feel, we get into this kind of like new normal routine, and we don't know if we're close to the rest of the school year or not. Like, that's still up in the air. I know a couple of states have fully shut the year, but we're not there yet. So we're operating under the impression that, we're returning the end of the month. And if we don't, then that'll be a new conversation that we have kind of about what our school day looks like for the long haul. So I think right now we're trying to a sense of like normalcy for them. Then at a certain point, once we get to a point where we know what we're doing, kind of a culture shift for everybody involved. I think for teachers, for what they need at home as people, not going back to school, not being with their friends and their apartments, there's no park nearby, there's no, their streets are narrow, different perspective. So work life's not great, but their student life's not great either. So I think priority is shifted to them, and then it'll kind of work its way back up to the teachers and the school years.
Very good. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining this conversation today. And this was Lealin, I probably would have benefited from asking you some questions about bandwidth and stuff like that. We wouldn't have had so many technical difficulties. This is my first time running this class, and I'm really lucky that I've been able to stay in contact with such amazing educators. I mean, Riki and Lealin, Riki, we haven't been in touch at all. Lealin, the puns, but other than that, I think I got lunch with you once 6 years ago, something like that. And Rachel, we don't talk so much either. And it's just really, really, really cool that you guys are, that first of all, we connected so long ago, and in a place that birthed us into these kind of different careers where we're each like working really hard and doing really important work. And, I follow the topics that people talk about in education, and there's not too much about the stress already being a teacher is so stressful, and there's all these, new things that are on our plates, but we're not going anywhere. We're here for it. And Lealin, I appreciate that you are, I was trying to figure out kind of what you do, what your background is, and you're very much on the team. And I just, we're doing really important work. So safety of the student is always the most important thing. And of course, taking care of yourselves, because they need you. And that's really the most important thing right now. They need you to be something stable in their lives. We talked about putting everything in Google Slides. You need to be their Google Slide. They need to know what they're getting with you. And, who knows what's going on at their homes and their lives. Lealin, people are reaching out to you for help because, they don't know how to do things, but there's always a tax on doing something new, and so many new things are happening that so many people are paying, extra price. So I appreciate your guys' flexibility first, on the littlest level, on your flexibility in working with my tech issues, but then on the most meta level, you guys being so flexible and offering yourselves, to this profession. And I just, you guys are doing really good work, and thank you very much for attending today. And just be safe.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
Thanks, Theo.
Can't say how proud I am of you three. Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Have a good night.